When you're looking for action, you can't do better than Jonny Quest.
Jonny Quest was completely out of the norm.
Jonny Quest was like if you asked a 10-year-old boy what they wanted to see in a show.
Some of the best looking work ever done in the history of animation.
They gripped your attention, they held your attention.
Nothing was cooler than Jonny Quest.
What was different about Jonny Quest was animation in primetime was a fairly new thing. Hanna-Barbera had done Flintstones and Jetsons, I think. This was them taking that and going in a different direction, making an action show, really, in animation, which had never been done before.
They were thinking originally of doing an adaptation of Jack Armstrong, an old radio show, and that was the first development that was done for it.
And what happened is when they were into it a little bit, they realized that it might be better and give them more artistic freedom to just create their own characters from whole cloth.
The artistic crew from Hanna-Barbera had to completely get into waters that were utterly unknown to them. These people drew guys with big feet running around in their Flintstone-mobile and stuff. They had never made realistic figures move.
Doug Wildey had made a name for himself doing adventure comic strips, and Bill and Joe knew that.
Doug tapped outside of the animation field and brought in people that were traditionally adventure strip cartoonists and trained them to work in animation.
Most artists don't particularly care for drawing things that are really, really detailed. And to Doug, that was Dreamsville. That was great. He liked doing that sort of thing.
The art style reflects his art style to a T. Johnny's bright yellow hair against his black shirt, Race's white hair against his red shirt, things like that. Those characters read crystal clear and were distinctive, striking, and unique looking.
The show really felt like a living comic strip. That was revolutionary.
Sounds like trouble, Doctor. We're due for some action.
You have to hear that theme song in your head and get ready for adventure.
The opening titles had pterodactyls and machine guns and mummies and robot spider guys, all done to this really cool music. And the first time I saw that, I just about, exploded.
The music was really an important component. It really kept your adrenaline up and pumping. That show had a tremendously good score.
The Jonny Quest theme is my favorite. I just like the jazz, and Hoyt Curtin had worked with Bill and Joe on virtually all of their projects.
Jonny Quest was the first time you had to do actual action-adventure cues. It's composed to picture instead of as a musical composition.
When I'd see that pterodactyl come out and the robot spy and the tank, my heart would pound. It was so thrilling.
More than anything, it's the animation and the quality of realism. They took great care to draw and ink the figures in the animation, which is just some of the best looking work ever done in the history of animation.
One of the coolest times I ever had was being invited to Doug's house to watch an actual episode with Doug of Jonny Quest. And he would make little comments about, like, when the jets would come in for a landing, he would be real concerned about if those jets had cast shadows on the ground.
They would actually use shadow on figures. You would get a sense of dramatic lighting, which is a real oddity for cartoons because a lot of times that's extra money spent out there.
The other thing that Doug brought to it, which was very different, was he really liked the idea of solid black areas and backgrounds. That went against conventional wisdom.
Animators fear black. It's not part of the palette. And Doug kind of pushed to make it feel like a nice, lavishly illustrated comic.
What was nice about Jonny was he was like, of course, the every kid. He was a very iconically all-American, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, adventurous kid. He was intelligent, he was sensitive.
Oh, for crying out loud.
But he wasn't afraid to throw a punch or two.
Jonny was really cool because he was very current. He was a hip kid, and so you could relate to him.
Dr. Quest is a character that is just appealing, being the smartest guy in the world.
Did you recognize that one, boys? That was a bottlenose dolphin.
I remember thinking what a cool dad he would be, because here he was, the scientist that had a lot of work to do, and yet took his kids everywhere around the globe.
He was an intellectual, but he needed race, I think, as the muscle.
Roger Race Bannon. I always saw him as sort of an Americanized James Bond.
Have you got your gun, Race?
Yes.
That's who I wanted to be when I grew up. Of course, I'm clearly not.
He's such a modern cowboy. He's such a modern man of action, like a dead-on hero. Race isn't just the big goon who beats people up. In fact, Race was their tutor and their teacher and really watched out for him like a big brother. And the subtext of the writing is he was assigned to the team somewhat reluctantly, but fell in love with the family and fell in love with the assignment. It afforded a lot of danger and things, but these people really became his family. Haji is like the best friend we all want. He's smart, he's funny, he can do really cool magic tricks.
Sim Salabim.
The good thing about that was, he had been adopted. Haji was adopted and protected, and he'd gained a family.
How come an 11-year-old knows so many tricks?
I don't know. Just smart, I guess.
It was a neat choice that they gave the cast a sort of international touch.
It was a way of bringing the exotic aspect of Jonny Quest with them. In other words, they didn't just travel there, they had some of the rest of the world traveling with them.
Jonny Quest needed to have a lighter edge to it, so Bandit was created.
It focuses and emphasizes the drama even more by having that break from the drama. So that's why when Bandit would go into his little antics, it would be the right moment to quiet the scene and prepare yourself for the drama that was about to ramp up into after that moment.
Bandit sort of set the model for the dog sidekicks. I don't think they would have had a Scooby-Doo had there not been a Bandit.
The two things I remember about Jonny Quest's sound effects the most were the bandits barking and the pteranodon from Terrible Turu.
Jade is a terrific character, and she was only in 2. They used her very sparingly, but very memorable.
Jade, what are you doing here?
I have some business with Race, naturally.
It was good to know that Race had a girlfriend, because he was a pretty intense guy.
I'd better have a look at Mr. Race Bannon for myself.
What I really liked in the Double Danger episode was how Jade was able to pick out the double by just a kiss. That was suave.
It also might have been the first time in television animation that a man kissed a woman, I think, that I could remember on screen.
There's a history there. There's the implication that Race has a real past.
Oh, the villain. Hardly villains, merely interested neutral observers.
My favorite characters from the show would basically be the villains or monsters that would show up throughout the course of an episode.
Jonny Quest was extremely scary.
Some of the monsters that appeared in the show were absolutely as frightening as they could possibly be to a young kid, which is, of course, why we liked it. It had that sense of danger that was missing from most Saturday morning cartoons.
I love all the villains on that show, whether they're creatures, and the creatures were fantastic, to the gun-wielding thugs, because that seemed more real.
One of the hardest things to do in animation is Jeopardy, because there's such a history of animation, somebody having a bomb blow up and then they look at the camera with a few ashes, but they're right back together again. In Jonny Quest, people didn't, if the bomb went off, people didn't come back.
It was a show where the villains died, except for Dr. Zinn, and that's because he sent other guys who got killed. And they never met him face-to-face in the original show.
Dr. Sin was really neat and very evil.
In a few moments, the secret parapower ray will belong to me.
You gotta love Dr. Zinn.
Proceed now with phase 2.
Dr. Zinn is a really terrific villain in the, I guess in the Blofeld tradition from James Bond, where he was a villain behind the scenes that manipulated or sent underlings after the Quest team. They never, in the original series, if you'll notice, in the 4 episodes he appears in, they're never in the same room with him.
Well, Dr. Quest is taking the bait, just as I wanted.
We will meet again, Dr. Quest.
Very soon, I promise you.
My very favorite episode is probably The Robot Spy. I have to admit, just as a kid, it scared the living daylights out of me and was so weird and creepy and unique.
The really cool moment that makes an impact on everybody in The Robot Spy, where the spider kind of robot, it sees the guard and the guard sees it. And he starts to reach for his gun and this thing comes and hits him in the forehead and he kind of goes, every single muscle in his body is seizing. And the fact that they would do that little bit of animation there to make sure that he kind of goes like that and then just falls in a heap, that's cool, because then you go, oh man, this is some bad spider thing. It was cool because they knew where to expend, energy. And also, they did explosions really well. They had debris raining down after the explosion. Nobody bothered to do debris before Jonny Quest.
My favorite episode, I think it's Invisible Monster. It's a creepy, creepy image, this unstoppable thing. It's pretty scary. And it still holds up. There's a lot of tension in that show. Plus it has the rocket packs, which I really liked. I wanted one of those so bad.
Another very fun aspect of Jonny Quest was the cutting-edge, state-of-the-art technology.
Yes, Dr. Quest.
Race, something's come up. You and Johnny better come on in.
The science fiction aspects of the show really made it cool to me.
They had hydrofoils, they had jetpacks, they had all kinds of things. Some of them were just kind of, theoretic.
Doug specifically mentioned that he was always looking into the popular science magazines for hints of what might be, so he could adapt it into the Quest format of super high-tech mechanisms and vehicles that they would always have in those shows. Part of the fun for us kids was to see those kind of things.
Jonny Quest was a plethora of fantastic vehicles.
The VTOL jet, that was so cool at the time. I thought science fiction. I didn't think there was anything that was ever going to be like that. And there you go. Now we have them.
There was enough that was based on real things that it kind of grounded it, made it, believable.
If I had to quantify the unique elements of Jonny Quest, one of the important ones is that was a show with one foot solidly in reality. Every other adventure show of its kind, there are superpowers involved, costumes involved, really esoteric or science fictional equipment involved. But Jonny Quest was a show where they're basically guys in a jet and they fly to a place you can look up on a map and they have an adventure.
Being able to go anywhere, anywhere at the drop of a hat, that was cool.
It just made the show richer and more interesting visually.
It gave the feeling that the world was big.
The way these shows were done, there's a timelessness about them that transcends time periods to me, that transcends trends.
The styles on the show are very neutral. There's turtleneck sweaters and jeans and sneakers and things that made the show last.
If you wore Jonny Quest's outfit today, no one would think it was old-fashioned. They would just go, oh, it's casual, it's comfortable, you look like you're ready to go.
Clearly, this show was an influence on a lot of people.
That show made such a tremendous impact on me that, I ended up in the business working on it. And the very first show I worked on was an incarnation of Jonny Quest. And I've never looked back.
I think Jonny Quest was the first successful attempt at making an adventure cartoon. There were the right people working on the right show at the right time. It's that lightning in a bottle that is really hard to capture. And that lightning hit me as a kid, and it stayed with me.
Well, it's easy to say that Jonny Quest was a nice collection of the right people at the right time to do the program. But that was no accident. Joe Barbera knew very well that Doug was the man for the job and trusted his sensibilities. Joe himself had fantastic action and adventure sensibilities.
It was unique as a TV show, not as just an animated show.
Most action adventure that was done in this country, especially done after Jonny Quest, wasn't done as well as Jonny Quest.
Given the quality of Jonny Quest, it's a standard set that's hard to meet up to in the time since.
Johnny's place in cartoon history in my opinion, is the best animated adventure show ever done.